Alright, time to resume with these schedule previews slash prediction videos. Next up, we got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Notre Dame, they're going to be in their third year under coach Marcus Freeman. His first year was in 2022 after Brian Kelly left for LSU. First year went 9-4. Second year, 2023, they went 10-3. So slight improvement in year two over year one. Many people are expecting some more improvement from old Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Key departures, one of them comes from the coaching staff, offensive coordinator Gerald Parker. He's going to leave to take the head coaching position at Troy. He is replaced by some guy from LSU, Mike Denbrock. He's going to become the offensive coordinator as well as the tight ends coach. That's a big key departure on the coaching staff. Now on the player side, you have Joe Alt, who's an offensive lineman. He got drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers. And Blake Fisher, another offensive lineman. He is drafted by the Houston Texans. So those are the two big losses. Also, you're losing your starting quarterback from last year, Sam Hartman. He now granted he did go undrafted, so maybe because he didn't get drafted, you don't consider that a major loss. However, in the position that is considered the most important in football, it is kind of a loss, no matter if that person went in the first round or went undrafted when you lose your quarterback. Now, maybe they've upgraded. We don't fully know. But because they're losing their starting quarterback, I want you to keep that in mind. Other key transfers, you've got Rico Flores Jr., wide receiver, transfers to UCLA. You got tight end Holden. I apologize if I mispronounce his last name. Holden Styes. He transfers out to Tennessee. And wide receiver Chris Tyree. He transfers to Virginia. Also, punter Brian Dowd, he decided to retire basically from the sport in general. Now, in terms of additions, you get wide receiver Bo Collins transfers in from Clemson. QB Riley Leonard transfers in from Duke. Wide receiver Chris Mitchell transfers in from FIU. Those are your major transfer portal positions. You also do get some significant help from recruiting. Notre Dame historically has been a recruiting powerhouse. And even though they're not as much of a recruiting powerhouse in recent years as, let's say, your Georgias and your Alabamas, they are still a recruiting powerhouse. So that recruiting class could help Notre Dame. How much will it help in year one? Probably not too much. They're probably going to be reliant on their current roster as well as those who transferred in. But over the next couple of years, even slowly starting this year, could be some help to Notre Dame. Now, that's enough of Notre Dame's off season and look back at their past season. Now it's time to look at the nitty gritty of this video, their schedule. Now, Notre Dame starts off by playing an SEC team. I'm not sure when the last time Notre Dame started off playing an SEC team was. I know there was 2017 and 2019 they did play Georgia, but in terms of starting off a season against an SEC team, I don't know when the last time that was. But you do start off against an SEC team this year, and it's Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M has been mediocre really ever since they left the Big 12 and came to the SEC. There's been 2 years where they did win 10 games. You had the Johnny Manziel Heisman year, and you had the 2020 COVID year. But pretty much every year since then, the running joke is Texas A&M only wins 8 games, because that's accurate. Pretty much every year, they've won 8 games. And that's been the trend under 2 head coaches. When they first came to the SEC, they were coached by Kevin Sumlin. He was the one who coached during the Johnny Manziel Heisman year, but other than that, he didn't really accomplish much. 2017, after the end of the season, they decided to move on from Kevin Sumlin, bring in Jimbo Fisher, and he probably, a lot of people would probably say he flopped worse than Kevin Sumlin, because Kevin Sumlin at least produced a Heisman winner. Jimbo Fisher couldn't even say that. But anyway, now they've moved on from Jimbo Fisher. They're hiring Mike Elko. He's coming in from Duke. He did do a good job transforming Duke. Most famously, they got the upset last year against Clemson. But the question is, how is he going to adjust from coaching in the ACC to coaching in the SEC? Because, yes, ACC, they have Clemson, they have Florida State, Louisville's kind of on the rise right now, Georgia Tech's on the rise, Miami. But overall, the quality of competition in the ACC is not as difficult, I should say, as the SEC. So that's kind of a question mark there for Mike Elko. Even though Notre Dame is on the road in this one, in College Station, I do think they get the win. I think there's just too much pieces that Texas A&M has to put together under their head coach to the point where Notre Dame should be able to win. I do think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be any more than a 10-point victory, but I think Notre Dame gets the win. Then you go back home, you play Northern Illinois, should be able to get the win easily there. Then you go on the road to play Purdue, and Purdue, they did have a couple years ago where they won the Big Ten West, but other than that, they've been pretty much irrelevant for the past few decades. In fact, the only time I can think they were even relevant was when Drew Brees was there. And now that the Big Ten West is now defunct, there's just one Big Ten now. I don't think we'll see Purdue really rise back to relevancy for a while. And I think Notre Dame should be able to beat them easily, so there we go. Then Notre Dame goes back home. They play Miami of Ohio. Should be an easy win there. Then you stay at home and you play Louisville. Louisville had kind of an out of nowhere good year last year. Made it to the ACC title game. Now they did lose that ACC title game to Florida State, where they only scored 6 points. But overall, decent season for Louisville, especially considering they hadn't really had a good season ever since Lamar Jackson left for the NFL. However, I do not think they're going to beat Notre Dame this year. I think Louisville probably has a comeback down to earth kind of year, and I think Notre Dame is going to beat them. Then you have your first bye week. Remember, 2 bye weeks this year, the way the calendar worked out. Then you remain at home. You play Stanford. There's 3 teams that I think are probably going to end up finishing in the worst for the Power 5. Or I should say 3 teams that have the biggest chance of finishing the worst in the Power 5. Vanderbilt, obviously, then Virginia, and then Stanford. Stanford, really since the days of Andrew Luck, has been on a slow crash course to bottoming completely out. And I think now that they're going to the ACC, it's going to get even worse for them before it gets better. I think you should be able to handle Stanford. Then you go on the road to play Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech is starting to rise up again. Brent Key is going to be in his second year as a head coach. They finished with 7 wins last year, which is an improvement from the previous year, which they finished with only 3 wins. A lot of experts claim that Georgia Tech is going to be better than they were last year. And last year, they actually did get the infamous upset over Miami, where, I know a lot of people are going to say, yeah, that was completely due to Mario Cristobal's own, I'm sorry to those who like me to keep it clean, but I can't think of any other term to describe it other than dumb fuckery. But the truth is, Georgia Tech really shouldn't have even been in the game to begin with. It shouldn't have even been close to where Georgia Tech could have got there. So that's a testament to Georgia Tech right there. And then not to mention, we always get to see, even in their best years, Notre Dame seem to lose to a team they never should have lost to, the exception being 2020, the COVID year when they were in the ACC, and the 2018 year when they went undefeated in the regular season. I think you know where I'm going with this if you watch my previous videos. I think Georgia Tech pulls the upset over Notre Dame here, giving Notre Dame what I think is going to be their first loss of the season. Notre Dame goes what is technically listed as a home game for Notre Dame, although it's a neutral site really, because it's played in East Rutherford, New Jersey, against Navy. Notre Dame has a tradition where they play both Army and Navy in the same year. The problem with Navy is that, and I'm not saying it as a knock on Navy, because the people that are in Navy are ultimately going to go to the armed forces to protect our country, which I think that's admirable. I mean, how many of you watching this video, I definitely wouldn't be able to do this, would be able to go in the Navy and serve our country with the dedication that those men and women do. But in college football, it hurts Navy because they're not going to get the 5-star athletes that Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan can get. They're forced to resort to the people who voluntarily commit to the Navy and voluntarily choose that they would rather sacrifice their lives than go play professional football. And that's really hampers Navy. Every once in a while, you see a good season where they get to a bowl game, but usually they finish like 5-6 wins. I think Notre Dame should be able to beat Navy. Then you get your second bye week before you go home to who I think is the toughest opponent you're going to have this year, the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State, they're going to be out for revenge this year. They believe they should have been in the playoff this year. I've already explained what I feel about Florida State, so I'm not going to bore you with that same explanation again. But they are going to be out for revenge to try and prove everybody who said they don't belong in the playoff wrong. However, they lose their quarterback, Jordan Travis. They bring in DJ Uiagalelei. I believe I pronounced that name right. Who is going to be a big unknown. He wasn't really good of a passer for Clemson to the point where the fan base was chanting for them to bench him for Cade Klubnik. You know you're bad if the crowd wants your coach to bench you for Cade Klubnik. He goes to Oregon State, does better than he did, but not really convincing. Now he goes to Florida State. He's going to be the presumptive starter. I am not completely sold on Florida State with DJ Uiagalelei. Now, I do think Florida State is not really going to fall off a lot. I think the rest of the ACC, there's not really a team that stands out as somebody that's going to dominate the ACC. I think Florida State keeps a lot of the momentum they had from last year. But I think Notre Dame beats Florida State. And if you watched the Florida State video, you know I already predicted it there. Then you stay at home to play Virginia. I already said I think Virginia is one of the 3 teams that are going to finish as one of the worst in the Power 5. I think you should be able to dominate Virginia. Then you have another technically home game, but it's also a neutral site against Army. Same things I just said about Navy, you can apply to Army. I think you beat Army. Then you go on the road, finishing the regular season at USC. Now, USC, probably the most disappointing Power 5 team of all last year. They were expected to go to the playoff by most media outlets. They had Heisman winner Caleb Williams returning last year. They ended up going 8-5 and didn't even make a major bowl game. Now, the quarterback that played in the bowl game for him, he is going to be back. Lincoln Riley is returning for his third year. Offensive coordinator, once again returning. Lincoln Riley finally moved on from Alex Grinch, so that should help the defense. Basically, with addition by subtraction, you get rid of Alex Grinch, who's probably the worst defensive coordinator in Power 5 college football. But I still don't really expect a lot from USC this year. I think Notre Dame beats them. And there you have my predictions. I think Notre Dame goes 11-1 with their lone loss going to Georgia Tech. Now, would this be enough for Notre Dame to make the playoff? I think most likely an 11-1 record for Notre Dame, now that we've moved to the 12-team playoff, would be enough for Notre Dame to make the playoff. Now, let's say Notre Dame slips. Let's say they lose the Georgia Tech game and they lose somewhere else as well. Like, let's say USC is the most likely, so let's put USC there. If they go 10-2, would they make the playoff? It really depends. Here's the big thing you have to remember about Notre Dame, is that Notre Dame doesn't have a conference. They are an independent school. In fact, they've adamantly been an independent school. Now, all the Power 4 schools considered Notre Dame a Power 4 team for scheduling purposes, but Notre Dame technically is not in a conference, and they're technically not a Power 4 team, which automatically disqualifies them from the top 4 seeds. Even if Notre Dame were to go undefeated, they would not be eligible for one of the top 4 seeds. And that has been the knock on Notre Dame really for the entire playoff era, is that they automatically are disqualified from a 13th game, do not have the ability to win a conference. Now, Notre Dame does usually schedule powerful opponents anyway, so that's not really a knock on them. But the lack of a 13th game and the lack of being in a conference, let's say they do lose a second game, that's going to hamper them. And then in that case, they better hope that there isn't a 10-2 SEC, 10-2 Big Ten, or 10-2 Big 12 or ACC team. Because if that's the case, then I think even at 10-2, they get left out. Heck, a 9-3 Big Ten team might get in over a 10-2 Notre Dame team. So I think Notre Dame, in order to guarantee themselves a playoff spot, would have to go 11-1. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Notre Dame. Again, keep up with me on Twitter if you want to see who the next team is going to be. Till then, Roll Tide 99 here. I'm out of here. See ya.